Good morning and welcome back to Rising. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in to our beloved show. Beloved by some, by many, I hope.
By millions.
Millions across the globe. Let's get right into it.
Well, Robby, James Biden, the president's brother, is set to appear before the House Oversight Committee behind closed doors today. This, the first of two high-profile testimonies the panel will hear this month as part of its impeachment inquiry into President Biden. This comes just days after Politico published a bombshell investigation finding James Biden invoked his brother's name in negotiations with a rural healthcare company, AmeriCorps Health, which would later collapse into bankruptcy, an issue oversight Republicans are vowing to broach during today's testimony. After James testifies today, Hunter Biden is scheduled to appear before the Oversight Committee Republicans in a week. Republicans accuse James, Joe, and Hunter of executing a pay-for-play bribery scheme.
Meanwhile, over on the Biden campaign trail, the president received another sobering approval rating of just 39% from voters in a new Harris-X survey. 56% of respondents saying they disapprove of the president's performance so far. Former President Trump, on the other hand, leading Biden by a whopping 9 points in that same poll, with a commanding lead of 47% to 38%. Meanwhile, in the battleground state of Pennsylvania, Trump leads there as well, even in hypothetical matchups against Vice President Kamala Harris and California Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, we will not forget to mention that in Pennsylvania, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is making a serious play with 8% of the vote in a hypothetical three-way matchup with Trump and with Biden. Now, President Biden probably gave his aides a small heart attack when he appeared to trip on his way up the steps of Air Force One yesterday. That's always something to be worried about when it happens. President Trump, on the other hand, faring better in the polls than in the courtroom. Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, is threatening to seize the former president's real estate from him should he fail to fork up the $355 million that they fined him for committing fraud.
Yeah. An incredible slate of stories that really says something about the political landscape of the United States of America. To the extent that Democrats were hoping to have a slam dunk framing of Trump as the fraudulent sort of cheating Republican on one side and Biden as kind of righteous and a man of clean hands and integrity on the other, it is complicated somewhat by the fact that Republicans decided to keep pushing this impeachment issue, now implicating not just his son but his brother in this argument that there is a play-to-play scheme. Now, the problem Republicans keep having is that there is so far, no, they're there. They've been pushing this argument with respect to Hunter Biden for quite some time now. But the fact of Hunter Biden or James Biden holding out Joe Biden's name as they try to exploit that relationship or allegedly exploit that relationship is not enough to actually implicate Joe Biden as having been a participant in that scheme. And that's the smoking gun that they still haven't found.
Sure. Frankly, I think the kind of Biden corruption stuff is taking a backseat recently to even more palpable concerns or more easily proven concerns about his age. He's providing more evidence every day that people are right to worry about his advanced age and whether it's affecting his ability to be president. Whereas the corruption stuff was it was focused around Hunter, and there were very legitimate questions there, and then also the way it was initially suppressed on social media has everyone very skeptical and waiting for the other shoe to drop, that kind of thing, and also the strong claims, the strong denials we got from President Biden in the White House about knowledge of his son's business activity was subsequently contradicted. So a lot of the kind of initial, there's nothing to see here, that the media put up this wall, that did collapse a lot. So people maybe are expecting even more to come out. But we haven't gotten to that point yet, and maybe we won't. But there is a lot of bad news for Biden anyway, because I think it's the age question, maybe some other things, is killing him in the polls all over the country, poll after poll. Yeah. Now in Pennsylvania, we see that swapping him out for one of those other candidates wouldn't actually make any difference. For a long time, Kamala Harris polled even more poorly than Joe Biden. That was one of the strongest reasons for keeping Joe Biden. Like his most obvious successor is less popular than he was. That flipped a couple months back, although I think some polls still show her with less favor, but it goes back and forth.
I mean, I think the fundamental issue is here, it's an entirely personality-driven campaign, regardless of what issue you want to pick up on. Whether it's who is more cognitively fit or physically robust, that has absolutely nothing to do with their policy agenda. Whether it's who's more corrupt or who's fraudulent, that has absolutely nothing to do with their policy agenda. And for all that Democrats historically resisted the idea of being sucked into personality politics and, derided and dismissed Republicans as being overly obsessed with the personality of Donald Trump, they have offered nothing in the alternative in support of Joe Biden other than that he's a good guy. And frankly, they've won that argument. A lot of Americans think that Biden is a good guy, but a good guy who's just not fit to serve. But what they've done is they left this enormous gaping hole in terms of what the prospective affirmative messaging, affirmative plan is for Democrats to improve people's lives. And meanwhile, as much as Donald Trump has been dogged by these lawsuits and finally has been very unsuccessful with respect to civil lawsuits, he is out there, the Republicans are out there talking about immigration, they're out there talking about inflation, and I would argue that they are also not meeting the moment in terms of what Americans need them to deliver as they're still struggling mightily on economic issues and have these other kinds of important existential concerns. There is seemingly more there than you're getting from Democrats, who seem to be singularly focused when it comes to policy on sending larger and larger foreign aid packages to support unpopular wars.
And are making their case against Donald Trump all about these legal issues that, the merits of any of the specific cases aside, do not seem to be affecting him in the polls whatsoever. You can no longer say it's not just among the Republican base. Clearly, okay, if you could say the Republican base doesn't believe in any of these things, they think this is a witch hunt, and actually it's made him more popular because they felt a need to rally around him as he's besieged by all these legal actions. But maybe general election would be different. But by now, it's not showing up in any of the polling of Democrats in it. I mean, Democrats already don't like Trump, but if you're, gettable, moderate, independent, swing voter people, they don't seem fazed by what Donald Trump is facing very much at all. If they are, it's not showing up in the polls.
Well, that's an important point, that I think that this is not a battle for attracting independent voters or swing voters as much as this is going to be a battle that's won or lost on the stay-home voters. Are there going to be a bunch of Democrats who otherwise would have come out and held their nose and vote for Joe Biden the way they did back in 2020 who aren't going to do so because they're so disgusted by Gaza? Are there going to be Republicans who otherwise would have come out and voted for Donald Trump, but they are not going to because they are disgusted by the fact that he might be convicted in one of these election fraud trials that may or may not come to a resolution before Election Day? Polls suggest that a significant volume of Republican voters say they would not vote for Donald Trump if he were actually convicted of having done election interference in 2020. Now, you can read those polls with a grain of salt. Who knows how much that will actually bear out? But that seems to be the game here. What side can discourage more of the other side's voters from coming out? And that is a really dark and bleak place for America to be in.
And it's not wrong. There are good reasons to be discouraged about both candidates, even if you are a Democrat, to be discouraged about your own party's candidate. If you are a Republican, to be discouraged about your party's candidate. Again, a lot of these criticisms being leveled at them are entirely fair. Donald Trump, I question the merit of some of these cases against him, including what he just went through in New York. But there is little question that he behaved in a reprehensible way with respect to the last election, in a way that harmed his own reelection, that was just tactically unsound, that was never going to work, and just humiliated Republicans and actually caused a bunch of his supporters to land themselves in jail. So that's true. That was all idiotic, and with a different candidate. I mean, Republicans are successful all the time in blue states, even when they're just a little bit more disciplined about who the candidate would be. But our primary voters right now have not shown any aptitude for thinking about general electability. But that gamble might pay off, because right now Donald Trump looks perfectly electable somehow after everything. This is a high watermark for him right now to be reelected.
It's hard to imagine, but we're sticking with it. We'll continue this coverage and more after this. Stay tuned.